Hello, and welcome to the Pragmatic Product Chat series, where we tackle the biggest challenges facing today's product management, product marketing, and other market and data-driven professionals with some of the best minds in the industry. I'm Rebecca Kalogeris, Vice President of Marketing and Product Strategy at Pragmatic Institute, and your host for this episode. Today, we are joined by our very own Todd Middlebrook. Todd, if you don't know him and have not had the pleasure of being in his classroom, is one of our premier instructors. He brings over 20 years of experience in product management, product marketing. He has worked at everything from startups to large companies, Microsoft, IBM, Virtual Bridges. He has done it all. Welcome, Todd.
Hello, Rebecca.
Always fun to have an instructor on. And Todd, recently we did 2 launches, right?
Yes.
2 launches internally. We launched a new Insight course for all our product team listeners, and we launched a new Data Science for Business Leaders course. And as we were going through the launch, 2 launches on one day, was very coordinated. It 100% made me think of you as our resident launch expert. And I thought, oh man, I need to get on with Todd and talk a little bit about launches and best practices and some of the big challenges that just exist in there.
So, hey, Rebecca, 2 launches in one day. Let me guess how much work you put into that. You're talking about what, 3 or 4 days of work to get those launches?
Couple hours here and there. It's pretty easy. Yeah.
If I were to ask you, if you added it all up, how many weeks, months do you think you put into that?
I would months, right? And it was obviously a very much a team effort. And then while we just had the launch date and announcement, as you know, too, we're not done yet, right? There's a moment of sigh of relief and breath. And then it's oh, we're not done. And for us here, we announce and then the course doesn't get held for 2 or 3 months because, we're doing promotions and driving attendance to it. Yeah. So there's sort of a second wave launch too of sort of the first instance of it live. But I would say months.
Lots of moving pieces. It's not just one thing. And they get complicated, don't they?
They do. They do. And I mean, I am in no way saying that our launches here at Pragmatic are as complicated as some of those people listening to us are, but I do think there are some commonalities. And I think it's a good reminder both to remember that you're not alone in this and also to always sort of help ground ourselves. I try to do that actually before we do a big launch. I actually tend to attend our launch course again, just sort of as a grounding because it, but knowing it and then remembering to do it and practice it are not
it's not even sufficient to go back and just look at the content of the class. It's really getting plugged back into that purpose and that coordination, and being able to come back and go, oh yes, this is how we're going to apply it.
So one of the things you mentioned, one of the things I think that makes it is the level of complication in a launch. So talk a little bit about why a launch is so complicated.
Well, it can start with, do we even know why we're launching the product in the first place? Many of our customers are high-tech companies. Many of them are early startup companies. And the complications can begin with, even the confusion of the product and the product launch. There's getting the product done, shipping the product. I love that term, right? We've shipped the product. That basically just means the dev teams, finished the product. But does the organization understand that doesn't mean the market knows about it? It doesn't mean that the sales team can sell it. So, getting everybody on the same page that it's not just getting the product complete, but this other campaign, this coordinated effort. And this is where you have to, and depending on what the launch is it a brand new product? Is it an update? The complexity differs for sure, but just the number of stakeholders that you might have to get involved, obviously the dev team, obviously the sales organization that you have. We probably intuitively understand we've got to do some marketing stuff as a part of this launch, but what about the support team? They're going to have to take that first phone call when a customer has an issue. Do we have deployment teams? Do we have partner teams? That just getting everybody who has some responsibility in making it successful once we get it out the door. And what I find, not only is it the complication of the different parties the different deliverables for them, like sales enablement, but also we're needing not just the dev team to do work, the marketing team, but other teams. We need contracts from legal. So there's things that we need for some of our stakeholders. There's things that we need from other stakeholders. And, you put that all together, and sometimes we don't even remember why we were doing the launch in the first place, meaning the business goal. And maybe you thought we were trying to get market share in a new market segment. Maybe I thought we were trying to sell a new product to our existing customer base. And if we're not clear about what that goal is, you could go off and do a campaign talking to our customers when I need you to go talk to this new industry of finance, and the messaging could be completely out of whack. So getting everybody pointed in the right direction is probably really the first complicated effort.
It's so true. The why, it's one of those things that sometimes as product people, we take for granted, right? Because we know the why, right? We established the why. We said, this is what we should do. We know. And we may even have told them once, right? And so in our mind, we've told them, right? But it's our role, and it's something we told someone else once. And so it doesn't necessarily penetrate the same way. And I also think it's interesting too, as we sometimes forget, the why is important to every one of those stakeholders you talked about, right? Customer support, finance, all of those, because it's the same kind of thing. When we're talking about, all right, is this targeting net new customers, or is it an existing share of wallet? Well, my customer support questions are entirely different, right? The level of experience I should expect from them. And that's true in every organization. So it's not just you and your closest buddies that need to know this is the goal and strategy, but the whole organization.
I mean, you make a good point. The questions that support should expect will be different depending on who we're launching to. Obviously, sales, who they're selling to, is going to be very dependent on that. Heck, I mean, let's be honest, this should really begin as we're defining our products, right? Who are we building the product for? Who do we plan to sell it to? Who do we plan to adopt it? But you're right, there's so many different parties involved in it. And I love the thing you said is, well, I told you what this was. It doesn't always stick. I mean, everybody's busy, right? Didn't you read the email? Which email? Oh, the email I sent 3 months ago about what, right? Yeah, I like the word campaign. It's adopted from military, right? It's a coordinated effort to go accomplish some desired goal. And that, if don't mean to be militaristic, but the cavalry needs to go over here. We need the Navy to go over there. And everybody needs to kind of know their part. But they need to know what that end goal is. And if you can imagine, if any of those parties lose sight, they could end up going to the wrong village. They could, go at the wrong time. And so it's a coordinated effort. And the product teams are really, if you go from a military analogy to a sports analogy, you're kind of those quarterbacks of it. It doesn't mean they're responsible for everything, but getting everybody pointed in the right direction, being able to identify who you need to participate in that overall campaign. And it is a complicated affair, and it should be, but it really does start with what is the objective in the first place? And then let's make the right decisions. And you're relying on your stakeholders that are contributing this campaign to make the right decisions for what's in their wheelhouse in order for us to be able to accomplish that collective goal.
Well, and the other reason I really like the use of campaign is when we think of a marketing campaign, everybody now knows, right? You can't just send an email out once and one is done. Right. One, the audience all knows that, of course, will go by. We all know it takes continual touches. It takes different ways that you're delivering the same core message, but to different audiences in different ways and what matters to them. And to some extent, when we're talking about our launch plans, that's what we're doing with all of our partners, right? In the same way, we can't just be like, I told you once, how did you not understand implicitly the 50 things that came off that for you? It's about sort of continuously beating the drum of this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it.
Absolutely. And you can't just say, Well, we sent out the 40-page launch plan.
I was going to say, which we all put all those plans and information in a big launch plan.
How about you personally? There's been times in my career when I look at that 40-page plan with such pride. Look at how much thought and consideration has gone into this, and proudly, want others to look at it. And but it has to be actionable, right? And people, we're pragmatic. They have to be able to practically apply and go do the right thing. And the word that just came to mind as you're talking, this is a team effort. It's not just the marketing team or the dev team. This goes across, so many different departments and organizational structure. And that participation, as you said, it's not one and done. It's we need that ongoing participation.
Well, and one of the things I know in our launch course that we've taught for a long time, right, is about the launch plan and the key elements. And it is really important, right? Because you, as that quarterback, you need to understand the whole kind of game plan, and it needs to be thought out and thorough and pieces. But to your point, I have done this. I'm going to be super clear. Like, I admit 100% my fault. I have 100% been frustrated in my career. I'm like, it's on page 17. How did they not remember? Right? Like, of course they don't remember. And it's not the same way. And I think one of the interesting things that you've developed for our launch class is not just, of course, you need the launch plans and you need the strategy, but you also really need to be really intentional on how you communicate that out and sort of creating other avenues for that sort of marry with that plan that talks about how do you get all those stakeholders understanding the why and where we're focused.
Right. And, zeroing in on a couple of things you just said there is that plan is unique for every launch. Many organizations come up with a launch plan. And, are we launching your product, Rebecca? Let's go to the launch plan. We're going to launch your product, and always using that same plan. It really requires that quarterback that understands both the business objectives, understands the product, to identify the right teammates, but also to, in coordination with them, build that right launch plan. And that's where all that complexity, all those different deliverables, where enablement and deadlines, and when are we going to be able to do it, and the project management aspects of it. But you're right. It really requires them to understand the big picture. And that's why in this latest update of the launch class, we've always provided a great template, kind of a general checklist, always intended to be customized. But, based on feedback and experience, we realize that it's still possible for people to lose sight of the big picture. And so, this idea of being able to tell the story of your launch clearly, concisely, so that, people don't lose sight of the forest because they're so focused on the trees, or I probably butchered that analogy, but and so we call it the 90-second launch strategy. And it really is that story that, captures what those details are really intending to do. And it's intended to be able to tell that story clearly, concisely to every stakeholder that you need to participate in the launch, every stakeholder that will be affected by the launch, your leadership, your board of directors. What are we going to do? And we're really excited to be able to, focus everybody in the right direction.
I think it's so powerful, not just about the clearly and concisely, but the consistently, right? It is an aid for you as well to make sure you are giving the consistent story to each party, and to each party regularly. We all know, again, it's part of that conditioning. Like, if they hear it, if we hear it, if we speak it consistently, that just helps reinforce it. And it's so easy when we're in the weeds to speak about it from the perspective of where we happen to be in the project right now versus remembering to come up.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of guilty of this. You can get so much into the weeds, even if you've done what I just described, you develop the right strategy for the launch. Once you get down into that execution, that daily minutia, you can lose sight of the purpose. Yep. And when things come up, gosh, maybe we can't ship those features. Should we hold the product, or do we, ship it without that? Or maybe we're not going to be able to get that ROI calculator done for the sales organization. Should we hold the launch? How critical is that? When you get down into those daily decisions, if you lose sight of your strategy, what your goals are, it makes it difficult to remember that and make the right decisions.
Absolutely. And now I'm pretty sure you didn't call it the 90 seconds launch strategy because it will only take you 90 seconds to develop your launch strategy. That would be a cool tool, though.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, if I had one of those, I wouldn't teach it. It's
like the easy button.
Exactly. And you probably would have bought it.
Yeah, I would have.
Yeah, no, we still have to build that strategy. It's just being able to tell that story. I kind of is that North Star that we can all point at and remember, the direction that we're going and the purpose that we have. So
it's the 90-second story you tell about your strategy.
That's exactly right. And it takes all, we have a worksheet. It's all the questions that you've had to ask and answer in order to plan your strategy, but really just pulls them out in their concise bits. So answer these questions. And if you answer these questions, we can translate that into this story. And, it's meant to be that summary, that story where we go, okay, now let's go understand your part of that strategy, this team, executives. Let's not forget what we're doing and how we're going to do this. Especially, awesome. You said your launch, months and months for 2 training classes. Some of the products that are alumni and others they're huge products.
Yep.
I worked at Microsoft, Windows, huge products like that, where the launch is 6-8 months of planning. Boy, it's real easy during a long time period like that for us to go off in different directions and get off track. And so it's always having that North Star to go back to.
I love that. Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek of what are the main elements of that strategy? What is that story, components that we want to make sure we include?
Well, it's the things that we said. You begin with the end goal in mind. What are we trying to accomplish for our business, right? The products are a means to accomplish our business goals. So why we make them, why we sell them. So clearly defining what that is, and then starting to lay out how are we going to accomplish that? What is it we're launching? Who will we be launching that to? There are different approaches for launches, right? I said they're not all the same. So what are the approaches that we're going to use? Are there obstacles that we're going to have to overcome in order for this to be successful? And how are we going to overcome those challenges as a part of this launch? And then
I love that. Oh, sorry, I was going to say, I love that that's in the story, right? So often, we know the obstacles, but we're hiding them and hoping that our mitigation strategy means that no one else will see those risks. But again, I think that's the superhero complex that so many product people have, right? No one will notice, I'll make it go away. You raise it. You also have all these partners who can help see when things might go in, and they have their own ways. We solved that with, this over here, or they can help come with those obstacles. And so hiding them just doesn't benefit us.
Yeah, if the plan is only going to work if unicorns are flying up and down the street, casting off fairy dust, why are we doing this? But yeah, they have to be, and this is building the plan itself. That's a key part of working with those stakeholders, is identifying those, not just gaps. Sales is going to need sales tools, but where do we have gaps in culture? Where do we have gaps in systems? I mean, one of my customers, late in their launch, they traditionally sold software, but they were launching a new SaaS platform. It was a subscription, right? They were going to be doing monthly subscriptions. And it was only very, very late, as they're getting close to going to market, when they realized we don't have a way of billing for that. We we have we have contracts. We used to sell 3-year contracts, but how are we going to track? They were doing it based on seats. Do we have the data to track how many seats are actually being used? And then how do we have a monthly billing, subscription billings? Oh, we didn't think about that. And of course, it ended up delaying the launch date until they could get those internal systems. So identifying gaps within the organization could be gaps with partners, or, sometimes it could be gaps in market awareness. I suspect some of your reasoning of having a multi-stage launch, making an announcement prior to the product actually being available, is to start to seed, to grow awareness in advance. And if there's not awareness of, some people may not think of pragmatic and think of design or think of data. So we've got to grow that awareness, build some fertile soil, and then we're going to be able to bring it to market. So we're looking for all sorts of gaps that we need to fill in order to accomplish that goal.
And, again, having a consistent way of telling that story, I pride myself here in I've been here for 10 years. I have a really strong understanding of how the operation works, right? And the business. And so I really try to think about, okay, my partner's going to need this in finance and this in here. And still, every single time, one of the very first people I talk to about a launch is our VP of technology, our IT, right? Because I'm like, I know you're going to need this and this and this. And then I tell him what we're trying to accomplish. And he'll inevitably be like, oh, and we'll need that. And I'm like, oh, you so will. Right. And I don't want to be the one who has to delay everything because I forgot to tell finance we were skipping the way, changing the way we bill. So again, that consistent story. Love that.
Yeah. Sometimes say, what you don't want to do is kind of like peer over the cube wall and go, oh, I think that team's going to need this. I think that team's going to need that. And I'll add that to it's going to those stakeholders and having them communicate their needs and identifying and sometimes point out things that you didn't think of that we're going to need for it to be successful. So, and it's hard, especially if you've been with a group for a long period of time like you have. And I understand how things run.
Right. Yeah. Don't do that.
I've done other launches here before. I know how to do this. That's it's human nature to kind of go back to what's worked for you before. But what made one product launch successful doesn't mean that's going to work for another launch.
So we talk about all of these key components that are in sort of the 90-second launch strategy. And I think it's so important people to understand the goals, sort of the obstacles, how we're going to overcome them. Is there a part of that, or would you recommend when people are telling this story that there's also like a success state story? Like this all goes well, this is what we're going to get, sort of the utopian vision, but like, here's the vision of success at the end so that there's like an excitement build up. I always think of a good story has that,
Yeah. I always say you've got to begin with the end in mind, right? And this is a story that we're mostly telling to our internal stakeholders, but it could be partners as well that you're wanting to not only ride along with you, but maybe to contribute to the success of the product. And, everybody wants to know why is this important to me? Why is this important to us? So starting with that and being very clear. And there's not only is that intended to create excitement, drive, to create engagement of the participants that you're going to be relying on, but making sure that that it's a revenue goal and you're not misunderstanding it and thinking that it's we're trying to make our customers happier. So keeping everybody, again, I use this probably over too much, but pointed in the right direction and a constant reminder. So yeah, and the majority of the people work for the same company, and what success are we all going to enjoy if this launch is successful? Nice.
So we're talking about building the big launch plan, making sure you understand what you're doing and why, but then also intentionally building the sort of 90-second story of that launch that you can use to be clear and concise and consistent across the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. so that their eyes don't cross with all the details. And I don't understand this. This doesn't impact me. But to be able to tell the story that everyone will understand how it impacts us and what we're trying to accomplish and how.
I love it. And I love it because if we lead with this, we sort of, what is it called when you're boating? Like you break the water, right? So it's easy. You're making the path for other ones to go. Otherwise, what happens too often is you've caused confusion, and you have to go back and then try to build it, right? And then there's just this extra energy, and it's tough to rein that in. But if you start with that, if that's the sort of leading piece, then you just kind of make the way for everyone to follow.
Yeah. Everybody logically says, well, strategy leads to the right execution. But we all are so execution minded that when, whatever the project is, we get involved and we just immediately like, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? And, but then we may not have understood what the strategy, and we realize that we can't really make these decisions, and we have to go back. But this is starting off with that strategy to then really give the context to help us make the right decisions going forward.
Awesome. All right. We talked a lot about a lot of different things. So I'm going to give you my favorite last question. If you're going to have listeners do 2 things differently tomorrow, based on what we talked about today, what would you have them do?
I'm so glad that was your question. I thought you were going to ask me what kind of tree I would be if I was. No idea how I'm going to answer that one. Okay, so this one's much easier. What got you here won't necessarily get you there. If you have a general launch plan, just know that's a recipe, and a recipe gets you, a cake. That same recipe doesn't get you a pie. It doesn't get you bread. And so you have to develop the right launch plan for your product and for the objectives that you're trying to accomplish. So not relying on that checklist. You will develop a unique recipe, a unique checklist of things that are going to have to be accomplished for this particular launch. And I like the imagery of launch because of that rockets and you think about the NASA had a checklist to, you notice I'm wearing an Apollo 11 hat.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, that was intentional. They had a checklist that got them to the moon, but that's not the same checklist that just got the rover to Mars. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing is understanding what those approaches are, and then being able to bring the right stakeholders together. You're not a hero, right? It's not about being a hero, but bringing all the heroes together from the teams, getting all those. I'm all about mixing metaphors today. Getting all those cylinders going, and we're needing the best and the brightest to build that launch team from. Yes, marketing. Yes, it's going to include your dev teams and sales, but you got to think very, very broadly. And of course, then they all have to have a singular purpose and goal. And if you can get them excited about that, and if they understand it, then you're going to get the best out of them.
Awesome. All right. And if people listening want to hear more and learn more about the 90-second launch strategy, they can, of course, join Todd in a launch class. That's always fun. And also, if they are an alumni, we are going to post that template in the Pragmatic alumni community as part of the launch template package. So they'll be able to go and get that template if they're an alumni. And as always,
add to that, sorry to interrupt you there, Rebecca. There's a worksheet that asks you the questions that you need to capture. And then it then shows you how to then translate that to what would be that story.
Yeah, I love that you walk them through the questions that help build the story. You don't just say, you should have a story. Right? Good luck with that. So, Todd, always a pleasure to have you on. I really appreciate it.
I'm so good to be here. Thank you, Rebecca.
I hope you'll join us again where you will tell us what kind of tree you will be. Because right now there's a bunch of people listening like, what would it be? And they're also reflecting on what they would be. Because that's what I did. As soon as you said that, I was like, what would I say?
Everybody wants to say the mighty oak.
Mighty oak. There's a lot of good trees, right? All right. That does it for today's episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And don't forget to join us next week when we tackle another great topic designed to help you elevate your product, your company, and your career.